The road that led to the house curved like a question mark through the hills of Batangas, half swallowed by fog. Lara de Vera pressed her forehead against the car window, watching the world blur into shades of gray and green. Her new husband, Marco, kept one hand on the wheel and another resting gently over hers, his smile steady, his voice calm. "You'll love it there," he promised. "It's quiet, peaceful." The house appeared like a shadow before she saw its shape, an old, sprawling estate with faded white walls and dark wooden shutters. The locals called it Villa Santelmo, Marco said, his tone light, though something in his eyes darkened when he spoke the name. Lara forced a smile, hiding the unease curling in her stomach. Inside, the air smelled faintly of salt and something older, something buried in the wood. The furniture looked untouched for decades, ornate, heavy, the kind of beauty that carried its own weight. Portraits lined the hallway, solemn faces, eyes that seemed to follow her as she moved. In the master bedroom, sunlight broke through lace curtains, scattering gold across the floor. Marco wrapped his arms around her from behind. "It's ours now," he whispered against her neck. "A new beginning." She smiled because that's what new brides do. But that night, long after the laughter of their first dinner faded, Lara lay awake, listening to the strange language of the house, the wind seeping through the shutters, the groan of the floorboards, the slow, rhythmic tapping that echoed from somewhere below, tap, tap, tap. At first, she thought it was a branch brushing against a window, but when she rose and followed the sound, it grew clearer, more deliberate. It came from the basement door at the end of the hall, a door painted over in dark varnish, with a brass handle dulled by time. She reached out to touch it. The wood was cold. From behind it, something creaked, like the soft shuffle of movement. Then silence. Marco found her standing there when he came upstairs for a glass of water. His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. "You shouldn't wander down here at night," he said. "This part of the house isn't safe yet." He kissed her forehead and turned her away from the door. She didn't notice the way his fingers lingered a moment too long on the handle before locking it. Lara tried to laugh it off when she returned to bed, but the tapping resumed just before dawn, faint, persistent, like someone trying to be heard through walls. As sunlight crept through the curtains, she told herself it was only her imagination, the house settling, the ocean wind. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house was listening back. Outside, the fog lifted slowly from the hill, revealing the lonely outline of Villa Santelmo, silent, watching, waiting. The morning after the tapping, the house felt different. Softer light poured through the windows, the scent of brewed coffee drifted through the halls, and Marco's voice hummed faintly from the kitchen. For a moment, Lara convinced herself the night's unease was only nerves, the aftertaste of change. Marco greeted her with that same easy charm that had once made her forget everything she feared. "You were restless," he said, sliding a cup toward her. "First night jitters, maybe?" His eyes searched hers for a moment too long. She smiled and nodded, unwilling to admit she'd barely slept at all. They ate in silence, broken only by the clinking of silverware. The housekeeper hadn't arrived yet, and the vast dining room made every sound echo. Marco spoke suddenly, his tone light. "I bought this place after my father passed. He left it to me, said it was where our family began." He gestured toward a wall of portraits, their somber faces locked in memory. "Now it's where our story begins, too." Lara wanted to believe that. She wanted to see romance instead of history pressing down from every corner. But when Marco smiled, his eyes didn't quite follow. Later, while unpacking, she found a small wooden box in one of Marco's drawers. Inside was a folded letter, edges yellowed, written in looping cursive. Only one line was visible before she stopped herself from reading further. "I'm scared of what he'll do if I stay." The signature was smudged, but the first letter, E, was clear. Marco's voice startled her. "You shouldn't go through my things." He stood by the door, calm but firm. "Some memories are better left alone." He took the box from her hands and placed it back carefully, almost reverently. Then, as if to erase the moment, he smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Come on, I'll show you the garden." Outside, the air was thick with humidity, the ocean glinting in the distance. The garden was overgrown, but beautiful in a forgotten way. "It used to be Elena's favorite place," he said without thinking. Then silence stretched between them, heavy and awkward. Lara looked at him. "Elena?" He blinked, recovering too quickly. "My mother," he lied smoothly. "She loved orchids." But that night, as Lara lay in bed, the name wouldn't leave her mind. Elena. The letter. The tension in his voice. The lie hidden behind a smile. Marco seemed perfect to everyone else. Successful, generous, well-mannered. The kind of man who could make people feel safe just by speaking softly. But Lara had begun to notice the smaller things. How he locked his study when he left the room. How his phone was always face down. How his mood shifted when she mentioned the basement. Still, he knew how to disarm her. One touch, one whispered apology, and the unease would fade, replaced by the warmth of the man she'd fallen for. That night, when the tapping returned, she didn't wake him. She only turned toward his sleeping face, studying the calm that she no longer trusted. The sound came again, faint, rhythmic, calling from beneath them. And for the first time, Lara whispered into the dark, "Who's down there?" The third night in Villa San Telmo was colder than the rest. The air pressed heavy against the windows, the sound of rain whispering against the glass. Lara woke again to the same steady rhythm. 3 faint knocks from somewhere beneath the floorboards. Tap, tap, tap. Marco slept beside her, unmoving, his breathing deep and even. She reached out and shook his arm lightly, but he didn't stir. The noise came again, louder this time, as though whoever, or whatever, was below wanted her alone. Lara slipped from the bed and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. The hallway stretched before her like a throat, narrow and silent except for the wind sighing through the old walls. The faint tapping continued, leading her toward the basement door. She hesitated there, the brass handle gleaming faintly under the dim light. The sound stopped the moment she touched it. For a long second, all she could hear was her own pulse pounding in her ears. Then came a whisper, soft, almost human. She staggered back, heart racing. "Marco?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. The whisper returned, drawn out like a sigh, followed by a low creak from behind the door. Lara turned and hurried back to the bedroom, but the moment she entered, the tapping began again. This time it came from the floor directly beneath their bed. By dawn, the sounds had stopped. Marco woke cheerful, unaware of the night she had spent wide-eyed beside him. When she told him, he only chuckled. "Old houses talk, Lara. You're just not used to it yet." "But it wasn't just noise," she insisted. "It was—" He cut her off with a kiss, the kind meant to end a conversation. "You need rest. Tomorrow we'll visit town, meet some people. You'll feel less isolated." She nodded, though the unease clung to her like damp air. Later that afternoon, while Marco took a phone call outside, Lara wandered into the living room. Her eyes were drawn to a framed photograph on the mantel. A woman in a white dress, smiling beside Marco. The handwriting on the frame read, "Elena, 2018. Lara's breath hitched. The letter. The lie. The name he claimed was his mother's. When Marco returned, she pointed at the photo. "You said Elena was your mother." He froze for half a heartbeat, then smiled too quickly. "Ah, I meant she was like a mother to me, my cousin's wife. Poor thing passed away." Lara studied his face. The charm remained, but the warmth had thinned, like paint stretched too far across the canvas. That night, she locked the bedroom door. Marco laughed it off, teasing her for being superstitious. But once he fell asleep, she pressed her ear to the floor. The house was breathing again. Faint groans, soft sobs, and something dragging slowly through the dark. She recorded the sounds on her phone, whispering, "If it's you, Elena, please, tell me." A long pause. Then, faint and broken, came a reply. A single word so fragile it might have been imagination. "Help." Lara dropped the phone. The tapping began once more, louder, closer, as though someone was knocking from inside the walls themselves. Lara barely slept after hearing the whisper. Every creak of the floor, every breath of wind felt like something moving beneath the surface of the house, unseen, waiting. When morning came, Marco was already dressed, humming while he brewed coffee. He looked refreshed, almost radiant. She, on the other hand, felt hollowed out. He noticed her pale face and smiled softly. "You've got to stop watching horror shows before bed." "I didn't," she murmured. "I heard someone say something." Marco's smile faltered for a split second. "It's just the pipes," he said. "Old houses make strange sounds." But when she mentioned she had recorded it, his entire posture stiffened. "You recorded what?" "The noises, last night." He moved closer, his voice quiet but sharp. "Delete it. Don't let your imagination make you paranoid, Lara. This house needs peace, not suspicion." Something in his tone chilled her. It wasn't anger. It was warning. Later that afternoon, he left for work, claiming he had business in town. The moment his car disappeared down the curved road, Lara's pulse began to race. She retrieved the brass key she'd seen days ago, hidden in the drawer marked "Do Not Touch." The house was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of a clock somewhere deep in the hall. She walked toward the basement door, every step heavier than the last. The air seemed to thicken as she knelt to insert the key. It fit perfectly. The lock gave way with a soft click, releasing a faint, foul odor that made her stomach twist. A cold draft brushed her face as the door creaked open, revealing darkness that felt almost alive. She switched on the hallway light, but it barely reached beyond the top of the stairs. The smell grew stronger, metallic, damp, like rust and rot. She took one hesitant step down, the old wood moaning under her weight, then another. The sound of dripping echoed from below. Her hand trembled as she reached for the wall switch, but before she could touch it, "Lara?" She froze. Marco's voice came from behind her, sharp and close. He stood at the top of the stairs, his face unreadable. "I forgot something," he said flatly. "Why are you down here?" She swallowed hard. "I heard noises again. I just wanted to check." He cut her off. "You disobeyed me." There was no warmth in his voice now, no trace of the man who had once promised her forever. He took the key from her hand and slammed the door shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the empty hall. "This part of the house is dangerous," he said, his tone eerily calm. "You could get hurt. Next time, wait for me." He brushed her cheek with his fingers, but the touch felt like a test, not affection. Then he smiled, as if nothing had happened, and went upstairs. Lara stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. From behind it, something shifted, faint, dragging, like feet scraping across cement. That night, Marco left again, saying he'd return late. Lara sat alone in the living room, the brass key now gone, the air colder than ever. She poured herself tea, trying to steady her hands. When she glanced toward the hallway mirror, she froze. In its reflection, the basement door was slightly ajar. The whisper returned, softer now, almost pleading. Don't let him lock me again. Laura's cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. The photograph above the fireplace rattled as if struck by unseen wind, and her eyes caught the image for the first time. A woman smiling beside Marco. The same face she'd seen in her dream. The photograph haunted Laura long after she turned away from the fireplace. The woman's smile was soft, graceful, yet her eyes held something faintly unsettled, as though she'd known her picture would outlive her. Laura stared until the edges of the frame seemed to blur. The resemblance was undeniable. The curve of the jaw, the same long hair, the same almost timid smile. It was like looking at a reflection of herself, but one captured years before she existed in Marco's life. When Marco returned that evening, he found her sitting in front of the photograph. His steps slowed, and for the first time, he didn't try to mask his reaction. You found her, he said quietly. Laura turned to him. Who is she? He smiled, a small, strained thing. A ghost from another life. Her name was Elena. The name struck her like a spark to dry wood. Your cousin's wife? The one you said... He exhaled sharply. I didn't say she was my cousin's wife. You assumed. Her pulse quickened. Then who was she? His gaze drifted to the photograph, softening for a moment. She was my first wife, he said finally. She died in this house, a long time ago. The room went still. The faint ticking of the old clock grew louder. I'm sorry, Laura whispered. He sat beside her, his voice low. She wasn't well. She heard things, saw things that weren't there. I tried to help her, but she couldn't be saved. Laura studied his face, trying to read sincerity in his eyes. But beneath the grief, there was something else, something almost defensive. Did she hear the same sounds? Laura asked. He frowned. What sounds? The noises from the basement, the whispering. Marco's expression hardened instantly. I told you there's nothing down there. But... He rose abruptly, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You will not mention that again, do you understand? The sudden shift terrified her. For a second, she saw a flicker of something feral behind his calm exterior. Then, as quickly as it came, he forced a smile and reached for her hand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't raise my voice. This house, it gets to people. It got to her, too. Laura nodded, though her heart thundered. He kissed her forehead and went upstairs, leaving her alone with the photograph. Hours later, she found herself standing before it again, tracing the faint dust across the glass. In the dim light, the woman's features looked different, sadder, almost pleading. Laura whispered to the empty room, What happened to you, Elena? The air shifted, cold enough to sting. Somewhere below, a floorboard groaned. She felt a vibration run through the soles of her feet, slow, deliberate, like movement. The house had begun its nightly murmuring again. Her phone sat on the table nearby. She opened the voice recorder, hit record, and waited. At first, only silence. Then faint, uneven breathing, followed by a low hum that might have been words, too distorted to understand. Suddenly, the light flickered, the recording cut off. Laura's reflection in the glass trembled with the flame's dim glow. But there was another shape behind her now, faint and feminine. She spun around. The room was empty. The next morning, Marco left early, leaving a note on the table. Stop imagining things. Rest. But as Laura deleted the recording to avoid another confrontation, she heard something she hadn't before. A whisper caught in the last second of the file. Downstairs. Her throat tightened. She looked once more at Elena's photograph, and for the first time the woman seemed to be looking straight back at her. The whisper lingered long after Lara stopped the recording. Downstairs. The word throbbed in her head like a pulse she couldn't silence. Every creak of the old house now carried meaning. Every sigh of the wind seemed to echo that same quiet call. By afternoon, she could no longer resist. Marco had left for the city, and the house sat cloaked in its usual uneasy stillness. The silence pressed against her like a hand over her mouth. She found herself standing at the top of the narrow steps leading to the basement, the air heavier there, thick with dust and the faint scent of damp stone. She hesitated, gripping the railing. The door groaned open with a tired sigh. Each step downward felt like a descent into another world, colder, darker, forgotten. Her flashlight beam cut across shelves lined with rusted tools, jars of old nails, and a pile of broken furniture. Then the beam flickered over a section of the floor where the boards didn't quite match. The wood was newer, lighter in color, as if replaced not long ago. She knelt, tracing the edges. A faint draft escaped through the cracks, cold and musty. Her stomach turned. She pressed her ear against the boards. At first, only silence. Then, so faint she thought she imagined it, came the murmur. Whispering, slow, drawn out, voices blending into one another like air through teeth. Lara jerked back, her heart hammering. The whisper faded, replaced by the faint, rhythmic drip of water. She stood quickly, stumbling into a workbench, sending an old wrench clattering to the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the enclosed space. Breathing hard, she forced herself to look again. Logic whispered that it was just the wind, that the draft created illusion. But curiosity, sharper than fear, pushed her to continue. She found a crowbar leaning near the shelves. The metal felt icy against her skin. With trembling hands, she wedged it between the boards. The wood resisted, groaning as she pried. Dust burst into the air. Beneath the plank, darkness yawned open. Her flashlight's beam dipped into the gap. At first, she saw only earth and cobwebs. Then, a glint, something metallic. She widened the hole, heart pounding. There, half buried in dirt, lay a small silver locket. She picked it up, brushing away grime. Inside was a faded photograph. Elena's face, smiling that same mournful smile. And behind her, faintly visible, was Marco. Lara froze. The edges of the photo had been torn, but the image was clear enough to tell that Elena hadn't been alone. Marco's arm was around her shoulders, his smile distant, cold. Her chest tightened. Marco had said she died in this house. But how? And why was something of hers hidden beneath the floor? Then came the sound again. A whisper, closer this time. She spun around, the beam shaking wildly. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint hum of the house breathing. The light caught movement near the far wall, the faint sway of a hanging chain. Her phone buzzed suddenly, the sound splitting the silence. She fumbled to check it. A message from an unknown number blinked on the screen. "You shouldn't have opened it." Her breath hitched. The message disappeared before she could take a screenshot. The lights flickered. The whisper turned to a low, drawn-out moan, rising from beneath the boards she'd pried open. It wasn't wind this time. It was human. Lara backed up slowly, eyes locked on the gaping hole. The moan deepened into something almost like speech, a word she could barely catch. "Help!" The flashlight dimmed, then went out completely. In the dark, she heard footsteps above, deliberate, heavy, pacing the hallway. Marco wasn't supposed to be home yet. Her phone buzzed once more. A new message appeared. "You set her free." The house was silent again, but Laura's pulse refused to slow. The messages had vanished from her phone as though they'd never existed. She sat motionless at the edge of the bed, listening to the faint groans of the old beams above. Marco had returned late that night, moving through the house with deliberate calm. He didn't ask where she'd been, and she didn't tell him. But she could feel the air between them, brittle, stretched thin. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed the whisper, the locket, and the face of the woman whose smile mirrored her own. By dawn, the decision was made. She needed to know who Elena truly was, and what really happened in this house. When Marco left for work, Laura went straight to his study. The room always smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. His desk, polished to a dull shine, was locked as usual. She searched until she found the small brass key taped beneath a drawer. The lock clicked open with a quiet finality that made her shiver. Inside lay stacks of letters, medical reports, and an old leather-bound journal. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through it. The first entries were written in a neat, elegant hand. Elena's. The house feels alive. Sometimes I hear it breathing at night. Marco says it's only the pipes, but I know better. Page after page described sleepless nights, voices in the walls, and shadows moving in the corners of her vision. But the tone shifted halfway through. Her handwriting grew frantic. He's hiding something. He goes to the basement after midnight. I tried to follow, but the door was locked. I heard crying. It sounded like a woman. Laura's stomach nodded. She flipped to the last entry. The words were barely legible, smeared as if by tears. If anything happens to me, it's because of him. He said the house demands loyalty. I think he means her, the one beneath the floor. The page ended there. Laura closed the journal slowly, her hands cold. Beneath it lay a photograph, Marco and Elena on their wedding day. He looked younger, smiling the same smile he wore when he'd first met Laura. But something in his eyes unsettled her now, that hollow stillness behind the warmth. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. She froze. The study door was half open. Through the gap, a shadow moved. Laura? Marco's voice drifted in, casual, too casual. What are you doing in there? She slipped the journal back, locking the drawer quickly. Just cleaning, she called out, forcing calm. He appeared at the doorway, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't go through my things. I wasn't, she lied. He smiled, but the look didn't reach his eyes. Of course. He stepped closer, brushing dust from her sleeve, and whispered, This house doesn't like secrets, Laura. You'll learn that soon. Her breath caught. He left without another word, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. That evening, when he fell asleep, she crept back into the study. She had memorized the key's hiding place and retrieved the journal again. At the bottom of the drawer, beneath the papers, she found a folded document. A death certificate. Name, Elena Moretti. Cause of death, fall down the basement stairs. Laura stared at the signature, Marco's handwriting. The light flickered. The journal fell open to a page she hadn't seen before, a loose one tucked between the covers. If she finds this, tell her I'm still here. The house keeps what it's owed. The words seemed freshly written. Laura turned toward the door, heart pounding. From the hallway came the faint scrape of something being dragged. Slow, heavy, rhythmic. It was coming from the basement. The sound came again, a slow, dragging thud that rose through the floor like a heartbeat. Laura stood in the dim hallway, frozen, her eyes fixed on the door at the far end, the basement door. For days, she'd tried to ignore what she heard beneath it, the whispers, the faint tapping, the occasional groan that seemed to echo her name. But tonight, it wasn't waiting for her to come closer. Tonight, it was calling. The journal's last words burned in her mind. The house keeps what it's owed. She moved carefully down the corridor, bare feet silent against the wooden floorboards. Every step deepened the cold that clung to the air. A single bulb flickered above, throwing her shadow across the walls like a living thing. The metallic tang of damp earth grew stronger. When she reached the basement door, it was slightly ajar, just wide enough for a thin line of darkness to spill out. She remembered locking it days ago. Her hand hovered above the doorknob, trembling. Then she heard it, a woman's voice, faint but distinct, whispering through the gap. "Help me." Lara's breath hitched. "Who's there?" Silence. The whisper came again, softer this time, like a memory fading. "He buried the truth." Her knees weakened. She pushed the door open, and it creaked in protest. Cold air rushed past her, smelling of rust and mold. The stairs descended into blackness, the kind that swallowed light whole. She grabbed the flashlight from the wall hook, its beam trembling in her hand, and stepped down. The wood groaned beneath her weight. Each step felt like a descent not just into the basement, but into the heart of everything Marco had hidden. Halfway down, she noticed marks on the wall. Deep scratches, uneven, desperate. Fingernails had carved into the plaster. When she reached the bottom, the air grew heavier, thick with decay. The beam of light revealed a concrete floor, cracked and some damp. Old furniture covered in sheets stood like ghosts, and in the corner, the faint outline of something metallic. A chest. Its surface was streaked with dried mud, a heavy padlock securing it shut. But around its base, the concrete was uneven, as though something had been buried and hastily covered. Lara knelt, brushing the dust aside. Beneath the grime, her fingers found wood, soft, rotted. She dug until her nails split. The smell that rose from the loosened soil made her gag. She pulled back, coughing, tears stinging her eyes. Footsteps above, slow, deliberate. "Marco!" she called, voice breaking. No answer. The footsteps moved toward the basement stairs. She switched off the flashlight, heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give her away. The door at the top creaked open, letting in a faint slice of yellow light. "Lara," Marco's voice drifted down, calm, almost tender. "You shouldn't be there." She stayed silent, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. "You found her journal, didn't you?" he continued. She couldn't let go of her imagination. The house got inside her head, just like it's getting into yours. He descended one step at a time, his shadow stretching long against the wall. "Come upstairs. Let's forget all this." The flashlight flickered back to life and landed on the chest again. The padlock was open. Lara's breath caught as the lid slowly lifted inch by inch on its own. Inside, something shimmered faintly. A locket, the same one from the photograph. And next to it, strands of long black hair still clinging to a decayed scalp. Marco reached the bottom step. "Now you see what happens when you don't listen." She stumbled backward, the beam shaking wildly. "What did you do to her?" He smiled faintly. "I told you. The house doesn't like betrayal." The light bulb above exploded, plunging everything into darkness. And some were in that darkness, the sound of the chest slamming shut. Darkness swallowed the basement whole. The air was heavy with the scent of iron and decay. Lara could hear Marco's slow breathing somewhere near her, calm, controlled, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, a click. A small flame burst from his lighter, casting an orange glow across his face. The light trembled as he smiled faintly, the shadows cutting across his sharp features. "You were never supposed to come down here," he said softly. "You were supposed to be different." Lara's throat tightened. "Different from who?" He gestured toward the chest, its lid now sealed shut. From her. From Elena. Her voice shook. You killed her. Marco tilted his head, studying her. Killed? He exhaled a humorless laugh. No, Lara. She killed herself long before I touched her. The house only finished what she started. She stared at him, trembling. You're lying. Am I? He took a slow step forward, the lighter's flame illuminating the dirt around the chest. Do you know why I built this house on the hill? Because it was where my father died. He used to lock my mother down here when she tried to leave him. I was 12 when I found them both. His wrists cut, her body buried beneath the floorboards. That's where it started. Laura's pulse pounded in her ears. You're sick. No, he said quietly. I'm honest. He crouched beside the chest, running his fingers over its surface as though it were sacred. When I met Elena, I thought she could silence the voices that lived here. But she listened to them. She believed the house wanted her. She started speaking to it, whispering in her sleep. Then one night, she went into the basement and never came back up. I buried her because the police would never have understood. They'd call it murder. But it wasn't. Laura's voice cracked. And me? What am I, Marco? His eyes softened, almost tender. You were supposed to fix what she broke. I'm not your replacement. His expression darkened. You were chosen because you are her. Don't you see it? The same face, the same voice, the same fear. Lara took a step back. You're insane. He stood, closing the distance between them. The flame flickered dangerously close to her face. The house doesn't want me to be alone. It chose you. That's why it called you here. You think you found me. But it found us. The ground beneath them creaked, a low groan vibrating through the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling as the walls seemed to breathe. The flame sputtered. What's happening? She whispered. Marco's eyes widened. It's awake. The light went out. In the pitch dark, she heard him whisper, Don't run. But she already was. Stumbling up the stairs, her hands scraping against the walls, her lungs burning. She burst through the basement door, slamming it behind her. The lock clicked, but it wouldn't matter. Not in this house. Below, Marco's muffled voice rose, half chant, half plea. You wanted her truth. Now you'll have mine. The house trembled. Frames fell from the walls, glass shattering across the floor. Lara backed away, clutching her chest as the echoes of his voice mixed with something else. A woman's scream. Then silence. The lights flickered back on. The basement door stood perfectly still. Lara's eyes darted to the hallway mirror, and for a split second, she saw them both reflected behind her. Marco, smiling faintly, and Elena, standing beside him, her eyes black and hollow. Lara turned, but no one was there. The mirror trembled once, then cracked down the center. The mirror's crack still glistened when morning light crept through the curtains. Lara hadn't slept. She sat in the living room, shivering beneath a blanket, staring at the locked basement door. The memories of last night clung to her like damp clothes. Marco's voice, Elena's scream, the trembling house that seemed alive. But now, the house was calm again, unnervingly still, as if waiting for her next move. She knew she couldn't leave, not yet. Not until she saw what lay beneath the floor herself. Lara stood, her bare feet cold against the wooden floorboards, and walked toward the basement door. The air changed as she approached, heavy, metallic, almost breathing. She hesitated only once before unlocking it. The hinges groaned as the door swung open, exhaling a chill that raised goosebumps along her arms. The stairs looked darker than before, swallowing the light. She carried a candle this time, the faint flame quivering as though afraid to go further. Every creak of the steps echoed like a heartbeat. The smell of rot thickened. At the bottom, she saw the chest again. The padlock lay broken beside it. The floor around it had cracked wider overnight, as though something beneath had been pushing upward. She crouched, setting the candle beside her. The dirt was soft, disturbed. Her fingers brushed something rough and cold. Wood. She clawed at the soil until her nails bled, digging deeper, faster. The scent grew unbearable. Then her hand struck something solid yet soft beneath the surface. Her breath caught. She dug until she saw it. A patch of gray skin, the curve of a shoulder, strands of long black hair matted with earth. It was Elena. Lara stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. But as she stared, something didn't make sense. The flesh was fresh. The blood on the soil was not years old. It was new. Her candle flickered. A shadow passed over the wall.
"No," she whispered. "That's not possible."
Behind her, the steps creaked. Slowly, she turned. Marco stood halfway down the staircase, eyes hollow, skin pale as ash. "You shouldn't have opened it," he said quietly.
"Marco,"
she gasped.
"what did you do?"
He smiled faintly. "I told you. The house keeps what it's owed." She pointed toward the corpse. "She's fresh. You said she died years ago." He tilted his head, descending another step. "Did I?" Her body tensed.
"Marco, what's happening to you?"
He paused at the last step, his face half hidden by the candlelight. "You really don't know who you are, do you?" "What?" "Elena never left," he whispered. "The house brought her back. Again and again. It keeps taking her. Every time she forgets what she's done." Lara's heart pounded painfully. "You're lying." "Am I?" His voice was almost tender now. "Look at her face, Lara. Look closely." Trembling, she raised the candle. The flame flickered over the dead woman's features, and her breath stopped. The face beneath the dirt was hers, her own. She dropped the candle, and darkness rushed back. Marco's voice echoed through it, low and reverent. "You always come back to me. You always dig up what should stay buried." The floor shifted. Hands, cold, wet, and strong, wrapped around her ankles, pulling her toward the open pit. She screamed, clawing at the dirt, but the pull was relentless. "Let go of me!" Marco's tone was calm, almost loving. "It's too late. You wanted the truth." Her last glimpse of him was his face illuminated by the trembling flame, serene, watching her disappear beneath the earth. Then the candle went out. Above, the basement door closed on its own, sealing the darkness again. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Lara's screams were swallowed by the soil until only silence remained. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no air, no body. Then a gasp tore through her lungs as she jolted awake on the cold floor of the living room. The house was drenched in shadow, the windows black mirrors reflecting her confusion. Dirt clung to her hands. Her nails were cracked, bloody. She touched her face, still warm, still breathing, alive. But how? The clock on the wall had stopped at 3:07 a.m., the same time it always did before something happened. A faint hum vibrated through the floorboards, low, steady, almost mechanical. The smell of smoke crept into her nostrils. Lara turned toward the kitchen. Thin ribbons of gray smoke slithered beneath the door. Panic rose in her chest. She ran, yanking it open. Flames licked the curtains, spreading fast, greedy tongues devouring everything they touched. The old stove glowed red, its knobs twisted all the way to high. "Marco!" she shouted. "Marco!" No answer. She grabbed a towel, trying to smother the flames, but the fire only grew wilder, leaping to the ceiling. The heat was unbearable. She stumbled back, coughing, the acrid smoke clawing at her lungs. The house groaned around her, the wooden beams popping as they began to split. Through the smoke, she saw him, Marco, standing by the hallway, watching her. He looked calm, eerily calm, as firelight danced across his face. "Why are you just standing there?" she screamed. "Help me!" He tilted his head. "It's time to let it go." "What?" "The house," he said softly. "It doesn't want either of us now. It's done keeping secrets." "You set it on fire?" He smiled faintly. "No, it did." A loud crack split the air as part of the ceiling collapsed, showering sparks and ash. Lara ducked, covering her head. "We have to get out." Marco didn't move. "I try it once," he murmured. "It never lets you leave until it gets what it wants." She ran to him, grabbing his arm. His skin was cold, almost lifeless. "Then we'll make it let go." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time she saw something human there. Fear, regret, love twisted into madness. "You don't understand," he whispered. "You're not meant to survive this." Lara shoved him away. "Watch me." She turned toward the stairs. Smoke coiled upward like living veins, but she pushed through, coughing violently. Her vision blurred as she reached the second floor. The hallway seemed to shift and breathe, walls closing in. The whispering voices returned, rising in a chorus. "You should have stayed buried." A flash of light filled the hallway. The mirror at the end, the cracked one, glowed white-hot. She shielded her eyes. For a split second, she saw Elena's reflection reaching toward her, face twisted in anguish. "Save us," the voice whispered. Then the mirror shattered, exploding outward. Shards flew through the air, slicing her skin. Behind her, the flames roared louder, racing up the stairs. The entire house was an inferno now, screaming as it burned. Lara stumbled into the master bedroom, their bedroom, where the walls themselves seemed to melt. She found Marco standing by the window, flames crawling up his legs. "Come with me," she shouted. He looked at her one last time, eyes hollow but soft. "Maybe next time," he said. The floor collapsed beneath him. His body disappeared into the fire. Lara screamed, leaping toward the window as the heat seared her back. She smashed through the glass and tumbled onto the cold, wet grass outside. The house burned behind her, flames clawing at the night sky. She crawled forward, coughing, gasping, watching everything vanish into orange light. Then, from within the blaze, she heard a voice, hers, whispering from the flames, "You can never leave." And the fire answered with a hollow roar. Rain began to fall just as the fire swallowed the last beam of the house. The downpour hissed against the flames, turning smoke into a rising wall of gray. Lara knelt in the mud, coughing, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her hands were blistered, her hair singed. She watched the only home she had ever shared with Marco collapse in on itself, one final roar echoing into the night. But beneath the crackling of the fire, another sound remained. Faint, rhythmic, endless. A slow tapping. Tap, tap, tap. At first, she thought it was just the dripping of rain against metal. But even as the storm faded, the sound continued. She pressed her palms to her ears. It didn't stop. The neighbors arrived at dawn, drawn by the smoke. Firefighters combed through the wreckage, their flashlights cutting through the haze. Lara sat wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ruins. One of the officers approached her gently. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened?" She blinked, voice hollow. "The house. It wanted to burn." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "Was anyone else inside?" She hesitated. "My husband." They found no trace of Marco. Not in the ashes, not in the foundations, not even his wedding ring. It was as if he had never existed at all. For 2 days, Laura stayed at a motel in town, but the sound followed her. That quiet, steady tapping. It came from the walls, the ceiling, sometimes from beneath the bed. No matter where she went, it was there. Tap, tap, tap. On the 3rd night, she woke to find soot on her hands again. She sat up, trembling, realizing she was wearing the same torn dress she'd burned in. The air smelled faintly of smoke. The mirror across the room flickered, and in its reflection, the faint outline of the house appeared, perfectly intact, burning silently behind her. She turned around. The wall was blank. Laura stumbled to her feet, wispy, ring to herself, "You're not real! You're not real!" The tapping grew louder. Now it came from the bathroom door. She approached it slowly, her breath shallow.
Marco?
She whispered. The handle turned by itself. She stepped back as the door creaked open. Inside, the bathtub was filled, not with water, but with black, murky sludge that rippled as though something beneath it moved. The sound came from under the surface now. Faster. Tap, tap, tap. Her reflection in the mirror above the sink began to change. The face staring back wasn't hers. It was Elena's. Burned, ash-gray, eyes wide with silent screams. Laura stumbled back, shaking her head. "No! No, I saw you! You're dead! I buried you!" The reflection smiled. "And yet, you're still digging." The lights flickered, and the tapping grew deafening. Laura screamed, slamming her fists against the wall, trying to drown out the noise. Then, suddenly, silence. She gasped for air. The room was still again. But when she turned back toward the mirror, her reflection didn't move. It only smiled. Slow, deliberate. Then from behind her came a whisper, soft as breath. "You can never stop it." The lights went out. The next morning, the motel staff found the room empty. The bed was undisturbed, the door locked from the inside. The only thing left was the bathroom mirror, cracked with the faint imprint of a hand pressed against the glass. And when the silence settled, a faint sound began again, echoing through the empty room. Tap, tap, tap. It never stopped.